Rule number 5 states, do not join independent clauses by a comma, thus creating a comma splice. Rule number 6 states, do not break sentences in two. How might you break a sentence in two? Here the issue is using periods for commas. As a consequence of using a period for a comma, you are breaking up the sentence and you are creating a dependent clause set off by itself. The problem with a dependent clause set off by itself is that it does not contain a subject nor verb. Therefore, it cannot exist as a sentence or a complete thought. An incomplete sentence or an incomplete thought is known as a sentence fragment or a thought fragment. In order to correct the mistake of creating a sentence fragment, we would join the sentence back together by turning that period into a comma and using the lowercase c. I met them on a Cunard liner many years ago, comma, coming home from Liverpool to New York. Now we have one complete thought, one complete sentence. The sentence has not been fragmented by the period. Here's another example. He was an interesting talker, a man who had traveled all over the world and lived in half a dozen countries. Now what is wrong with this? Well, we've committed the same fault. After the independent clause, we've inserted a period, when instead we should have just inserted a comma. He was an interesting talker, a man who had traveled all over the world and lived in half a dozen countries. What is the dependent clause there doing? It's modifying the noun talker and giving some extra information about that particular actor. Now, by bringing the dependent clause and connecting it and joining it to the independent clause, we've created a complete sentence, a complete thought, and we've eliminated the problem of the sentence fragment. In all cases, you should write complete sentences because complete sentences express complete thoughts. This point was made several years ago in James Joyce's experimental novel Ulysses. There, in Ulysses, James Joyce purposely wrote sentences as sentence fragments to imitate the fragmentary nature of our thought process. He called it stream of consciousness. So here he will begin a paragraph. He stood at Flea Crossing. This is an independent clause because there is a verb and there is a subject. However, he follows up the complete thought with a thought fragment. Luncheon interval. A question. A sixpenny at Rose. Must look up that ad in the National Library. This is often how we might talk to ourselves. An 8-penny in the Burton. An observation that he makes. Better. On my way. These are all sentence fragments. They're all used to communicate thought fragments. Thus, if you are going to be using writing which is fragmented in nature, your own thought process will appear fragmented and not complete.